Now I'm betting not a lot of you have heard of this pattern I'm going to do today, but if you have, please leave a comment and let me know. Hello everybody, welcome to Savage Flies. I'm Matt, thanks for stopping by. So the pattern I'm going to do today is another one from John Chewy's Classic Steelhead Flies. I'm loving this book. This has been really fun to tie out of. So the pattern I'm talking about, it's called the Chappie. Now it was created by a guy named C.L. Franklin in the 1920s. Now Franklin was a writer for the LA Times who once did a road trip non-stop from Canada to the Mexican border, starting up there above Washington down to Baja, California. He made the trip in 55 hours, took extra gas cans with him so that they did not have to stop. And for some reason, there was a lot of fanfare when they arrived down in Mexico. Now, this story has absolutely nothing to do with a fly, but it was in Chewy's book, so I thought I'd relay it. Now, about the fly, it's just a big steelhead fly. I'm tying it on a size 4 today, and I wouldn't consider this a forgotten fly, but there's just not a whole lot of references to it out there. I did see a couple of pictures, and the ones online that I did see had a pretty, a normal sized tail, but the one in Chewy's book had a big, huge tail. So that's kind of what I'm going to go with. I think it looked really cool with this big, long tail, and it's just a pretty big looking bait fish imitation. Now, if I was going to tie this in a trout size, I'd probably drop it down to maybe a size 6 or 8 on a streamer hook, and in that case, I probably would go with a smaller tail. But I think the one in Chewy's book here looks really cool, so that's the one I'm going to try to tie today. So that's it. It's a pretty cool looking pattern, really fun to tie. I think you're going to like it. Let's give it a shot. So there's my hook in the vise. It's a pretty big one. This is size 4. It's a mustad. I think it's a 2X or maybe a 3X long salmon fly or steelhead fly hook. And I'm using red thread. This is a 70 denier, but you could certainly step this up. I'm going with a 70 because that's what I had in my spool. But a 140 would certainly be fine right here. So just take a base down to, about the point of the hook. Now the tail on this guy, really cool. Just a grizzly feathers, whole feathers. These guys right here, I'm going to take 2 of them, and I've already prepared them a little bit. See, I've stripped off some of the stem right there. I've got 2, and I'm going to put them concave sides together, just like that right there. And I'm going to try to keep them perpendicular, but if it doesn't make it, no worries. So let's see what we got right there. See, a tight wrap is going to spin it a little bit. I don't want it to do that just yet. So I guess Frankie had the right idea. He said a couple of loose wraps at first and then go with your tighter wraps. Now that I can take some tighter wraps back and it shouldn't spin it too much. Okay, I think that's fine. Now go ahead and bury these or just snip them off if you want. I'll just put some loose wraps and bury it. We do have a rib. This has got a big fuzzy yellow wool body with a red floss rib. So this is just a stranded red floss. I'm sure you could use a thread and double it over a couple times. And especially if you were using for your tie-in thread, maybe a 140 denier, you could probably pull out a dubbing loop down there and just double it over and make your rib with your tag end of your thread. But I'm using thinner thread, so I'm going to use a floss for my rib. Now, your options here, just for whatever kind of big yellowish orange floss or wool body you want. And I am going to use this wool yarn, and I'm catching it in full size. It's probably a 4-strand yarn, and I could split it up. For smaller flies, I usually do split it up and then just wrap 1 or 2 of the strands. But for this one, it's a pretty big fly, so I'm going to wrap this whole thing up. So just touch and turns, get as smooth a body as you can. Take it all the way up there to a little bit behind your eye. Okay, I think that, well, maybe let's go one more. We do have a wing up front and a hackle. But with these steelhead salmon flies, you can always back your head off just a little bit and it will still look pretty good. Let's go ahead and trim this guy. A couple extra wraps to lock this in. Now let's wrap our rib. I'm going to counter wrap it just to kind of keep that, keep the rib from going too much in those grooves. If I wrapped it the same way I wrapped that wool, then they would sink into the natural grooves, which I really don't want. So I'm kind of trying to do it opposite of that right here. Okay, I think that's going to be fine. Let's catch this off with a couple of wraps. Now the top wing. So the top wing, I'm using the same thing, same Grizzly hen, just bigger and a little bit scragglier feathers if you've got them. I think that would look pretty cool. But doing the same thing, turning the concave sides together, and I've stripped off enough on the stem right there. And I think that is going to be it right there. So let's catch these in and a little bit back because we do have our a front hackle, a collar hackle. Okay. I think that is going to work right there. Okay, now let's snip this excess off right here and take one more of these hackles for the collar. And I'm going to use, I really want it to be pretty long. So see these long feathers or long fibers right there? I want that almost to the point of the hook. So I'm going to catch it in from the tip, but not too close to the tip. You know, maybe a good 3/4 of an inch back, so that the first wrap is putting down some fairly long fibers. Let's go ahead and catch this in. Try not to mess up my top feather right there, the wing. Okay, and maybe fold that back, get a couple wraps going back. Now snip off this tip. And I got one fiber right there, we can get that one. Now let's wrap this. A good 3 or 4 wraps if you can get it. Just a big, long, kind of bushy hackle right here. The one picture I've seen of this in Shuey's book had a pretty significant collar hackle right here, and it looked really good. So I wasn't counting. That's probably 3 wraps right there. Let's try to do another. Or maybe a half. My stem is getting a little bit thick right now, so I don't want to go too much more. Okay, 1 wrap, 2 wraps, that should be secure. Now I can snip this off right here. And now let's clean up this head. Just push it back, and we're going to build a big thread head that we can harden up with some head cement and UV resin. So I'm going to take this and just, this is where using a 210 or a 140 denier would probably be better. It would take fewer wraps to get a nice head. But do what you got to do. So I'll spin several wraps right here to build a nice red head. Okay, and when you've got a head big enough to your liking, go ahead and whip finish it. We'll do a little bit of cleanup before we put the head cement on it. And that kind of made a little mess. See what happens if you're not careful and you break your thread doing your whip finish? Let me show you real quick how we can recover from that. Especially with this head, that's not too big. I've got plenty of room. I'm going to just put more wraps down. That way it'll keep a clean head, and I'll be a little bit more careful on this next whip finish. Let's see if we can pull this off a little bit cleaner this time. Yeah, you just have to be careful and go slower. And there we go. That head should do. Now, do we have any cleanup? I've got some long fibers right there. I've got a crazy one sticking off the bottom. But overall, I'm good with it. Dropping my head cement on the head right there, and this thing will be ready to fish. So there you go, folks, the Chappie. Pretty neat looking little steelhead pattern. So that's it, everybody. I appreciate you watching. Y'all take care, and we'll see you next time.